We are going to start today with looking at Chapter 4, which is about marketing research. And since we are in the information age in the United States, marketing research is a very important part of marketing. It's where we get all our knowledge, all our information, all our data about competition, the marketplace, and consumers. So spend some time talking about research. The objectives of this chapter, we're going to look at the role of a marketing information and a marketing decision support system and how we use those in the organization. We're going to look at data mining and data warehousing and where that fits into the pieces today. And we're going to look at the steps and types of marketing research that we can have. Just be aware of how important this area of marketing is for corporations. There are many companies looking for marketing research people. If you're interested in this at all, you might even consider pursuing a master's degree in marketing research. It's an MMR, Master's in Marketing Research. And there are 4 or 5 universities in the United States that offer these degrees, and they're very popular, hard to get into, but companies really recruit out of those positions. And if you like to do research, that's certainly a wonderful career path to choose. Knowledge, information, data, how we make decisions. We rarely make decisions without some kind of information. Even if it's minimal, we have information to make every research we make as consumers. If we take the input from other people, opinions of other people, people we look up to. If we actually go and do our own research. Used to have something called consumer reports, which we certainly still do have, but with the internet today, there are so many areas where we as consumers can get information. The problem with that is make sure you have reliable and truthful information when you use that. Marketing research provides accurate, up-to-date, relevant information, and there are many areas where we need to collect data for this research. We need research for consumers, for competition, for the marketplace, for technology, for the economy, and so on. When I worked at NCR, I was what you might want to call the IBM spy, and I was to collect data on IBM's systems that we competed with. And it was very easy to do. I would call up, and I worked with financial equipment, so I call up banks and ask, knowing that they had an IBM system, if I could come in and look at the system and see how they used it. And I told them I was with NCR, and they always let me in. The only qualification was that when I was there, they always had the IBM person there too. And I would get the information, bring it back, put it together, and send it out to our sales force. Okay, marketing research should be conducted in an ethical manner. Indeed, it should. Many years ago when I was in my psychology undergrad program, there were a lot of interesting projects that were being done because even earlier than that, there were people who were fairly abusive with doing research with humans. That is why we have something at universities, and it's typically called an institutional review board, where research that you conduct has to be approved by this group of individuals because you cannot abuse or in any way be unethical toward your subjects. A marketing information system determines what information you need. We need it, put it together, analyze it, keep it, distribute it, whatever we need to do with it. That's a marketing information system. Those of you who are information systems majors will very well be involved in something like this. A marketing information system versus a marketing intelligence system, and differentiate these a little bit because they are different, and if you're collecting data you need to know which you're using this for. And the marketing information system we have defined, that's where you get the information and use it. The marketing and intelligence system is the process where managers use this information collected in the marketing information system and make decisions with it. One of the areas where you can get information is the internal data. A lot of companies tend to ignore this information. You have a lot of information sitting in those files within your own company. Salespeople almost always have to do some kind of reports on customers, potential customers, competition, and file those away. Intranets are those internal systems where you can share data. A lot of companies are using those now. Marketing research, let's define it. Collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data about customers, competition, and the business environment to improve marketing effectiveness. If you look at the Nielsen reports on chapter 16, which is retailing, I will actually offer you a presentation done by Nielsen on current trends in retailing. Nielsen has a lot of information. You usually have to buy it if you're the company. They don't give it away. They give it to us as educational institutions. But they collect a lot of information. But there are a lot of those available worldwide. When you listen to Debbie Durr's presentation, she will give you a lot of information on databases for international business. Okay, external databases, and there are many, many, many of these where you can get information. Just be very careful about misusing databases. Be careful of what you do. Also, as a consumer, be very careful who you give information to. Here's the marketing decision support system. These are the folks, the individuals who work with this data. Down here on the bottom left, you have your MIS system. That's your marketing information system. Internal data, marketing intelligence, marketing research, databases. Go into some kind of statistical and modeling software where you can use SAS or SPSS. Those of you who take marketing research, you will no doubt use one of those statistical packages. That's the information needed. Up on the top, you have your decision maker who is using this information to make decisions. Data mining is an enormous piece in marketing now. This is if you have a Kroger Plus card, if you do something with any of the department stores or any of those like drugstores, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, all have these cards we can use. Almost all companies offer those now, and they're collecting data about you. Data mining, that's looking at all that data. Think about all the customers that Kroger has, and they go in there and they look at all that information about you and all the other hundreds of thousands of people they have as customers. And they use that data to look for patterns in behavior. And with that information, they either target you individually, which is kind of that customer relationship management piece, or they look at the different store behavior so that the stores may be designed appropriately for the customers going there. If you go to any of the Kroger superstores they have now and look at how differently they are designed, that layout design is coming from the data mining process they went through to decide what the customers who go to that store actually like and need and want. There's another piece of this called data warehousing. Data warehousing is that physical system where they retain the data. So when you go to Kroger's, they capture the data, they keep it on a data warehouse system, then they go in and use data mining to look for patterns of your behavior. Data mining, when you look at location-based mobile advertising, look at all the different things that we have as far as apps. All of that is involved in data mining. It isn't just the Kroger cards at all. I don't mean to imply that, but that's an example of how you use that. Uses of data mining. We've talked about this a little bit in customer relationship management, which is in chapter 7. But this is essentially to understand your customer, to acquire those profitable customers, to retain them and their loyalty to the organization. Now, that bottom piece, customer abandonment. If you have problematic customers or something, you can basically eliminate from the system if you use your data mining processes correctly. Steps in the marketing research process. Number one, of course, first of all, is defining the problem. That's the critical piece here. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the wrong problem. Analyze the situation. Get your problem-specific data interpret the data and solve the problem. That can take a day, it can take months, it can take years. These are just some internet sites that are very helpful for doing marketing research. You may very well use these in some of your classes, and there are thousands of these. Marketing research designs. You have essentially two types of research. You have primary and secondary. And let me go forward here for just a moment. Oops. Oops. Don't you love it when I oops? Yeah, let me use this one. Secondary data sources and primary data sources. And which of these you use depends upon that research question. Remember when we said identify the problem? That's the first step. That dictates what kind of data you need. Secondary data comes from already existing information. So if, for instance, you wanted to find out, let's take Ohio State University as an example. They wanted to find out why incoming freshmen choose the university they choose. Now this would be a broad-based question. Why do students choose which university they go to? I'm confident there are many companies who have that data. They've surveyed all kinds of students going into various colleges and universities, so they know that. However, if Ohio State wanted to know specifically why students come to Ohio State, then that would require primary data source, because that doesn't exist. The information to answer that does not exist. They would have to collect that information. Now realize that secondary versus primary. Secondary is easier, faster, typically less expensive. However, it may not answer your question. Primary, you have to design the study, you have to collect the data, input the data, analyze the data, and come up with the solution. So secondary is easier, faster, less expensive. Primary takes a lot more time and resources, but it may not answer your question. So you have to determine what your question is and how critical it is that you have data specific to that question. You may not be able to afford to do primary data collecting. You may not have the expertise to do it, so you may have to resort to secondary. Some of the research approaches: observational, focus group, survey, behavioral, and experimental. Observational, if you've ever been in like typically a grocery store and someone's in there with a clipboard or one of those little inventory scanner things they have, they may be collecting data on their inventory. They may be collecting data on you to see what you're doing, what you're looking at, how you're doing it, and so on. Focus groups, this is typically for exploratory, where you're beginning the research study, where you put a group together, get input from them. There are a lot of ways to do that. You have to be very careful about who does it, who's involved, how they ask questions, and so on. Survey work, you've probably answered lots of surveys. Behavioral, that's where they look at what you do, how you do, why you do it. Experimental is where you try to control one variable and let everything else move as it may, and then you see what that controlled variable does, if that has any impact. Exploratory or qualitative research. Exploratory doesn't necessarily have to be qualitative, so let's just call this qualitative. You're trying to get insight into individuals. You typically ask in-depth questions. The problem is how you interpret. Let me give you an example. I had a colleague in my doctoral program at University of Cincinnati, and he worked for Burke Marketing Research in Cincinnati, part-time. And one of his projects, he had to call people at home, and he would get them on the phone, and he would tell them who he was, what he was doing. And, of course, most people would hang up on him. But those who didn't, he would say to them, I want you to play like you're Dorito. How do you feel? Now, you get all sorts of different responses to that. Crunchy, cheesy, tart, spicy, on and on and on. The problem becomes, how do you interpret that information? Well, that research, and he did this for, I don't know, hundreds of consumers probably, if you remember a few years ago, Doritos came out with a 3D Dorito, and the research he did actually was used by Dorito to develop that 3D Dorito. So this works. The problem becomes, how do you interpret the data? Quantitative, this is where you can attach a number to something. And remember, we have primary and secondary, and with either you can do the quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative, this is usually large numbers of observations. You do have numbers. You can use cross-sectional design. You can use longitudinal in that you study something over time. Causal research, this is a very interesting, it's exactly what it says it is. What caused this behavior? What created this kind of behavior? You can do this in two different ways. You can do experimental designs where, again, you control one variable and let everything else move around it to see the impact. You can do predictive sorts of things where you use regression analysis, where you put together a lot of variables and try to predict something. For instance, we could try to predict your final grade for this class. So the dependent variable would be your grade. The independent variables could be things like amount of time spent studying, amount of time spent online, amount of time spent reading your book. Could be your GPA could go in there, maybe number of credits you're taking. So we could put all of these sorts of things in there to see if we can predict what your grade would be for this class. So that's the kind of thing we do with causal research. Experiments are also done in that you, again, try to predict why something happened, and you typically with these look at one variable. You control the environment. Online research, a lot of people using it, a lot of companies using it, very challenging. Advantages is that you can get a lot of information quickly. It's not very expensive. Disadvantage is, first of all, consumer privacy. Secondly is that who exactly is this person completing the survey or something that you're doing online. There are a lot of disadvantages for online research, but it can be done quickly. It's fairly inexpensive. You may not get a real good sample that way either. It's going to be people who are only online and who typically feel comfortable doing something online. Collect the data, garbage in, garbage out. Boy, is that the truth. If you don't design the survey correctly, you'll get basically nothing. How do you interpret the data? That's very challenging. What you get out of most research studies is information. It's knowledge. It doesn't make the decisions. You can do sorts of tabulations, crosstabs. This is a typical crosstab where you look at the information. The question is, do you prefer a meal with high fat content, medium fat content, or low fat content? You put the numbers together and you look at the percentages. So most of the people who answered this wanted medium fat content. Now, what does that mean? How do they interpret medium fat content? That's always the issue when you look at things like that. But this is crosstabs. It's basically reporting the summary statistics of the information you collected. If you're doing a research report, these are the pieces that are in it. You may very well be doing this. You may do this in classes you take. You do the executive summary. That's the thing you write last. It's the thing that they're going to read first. You describe the research methods. You describe the design of the study, how you did it, who did it, and so on. You give them the results. You give them the weaknesses of the study, and each study has weaknesses. There's no perfect study. And then give them conclusions and recommendations. Good research, and this is a real important piece. First of all, it is scientific. There is something called the scientific method that you are trained in when you do research correctly. Good research is creative in that you don't need to spend time and resources answering a problem someone else has already answered. You use multiple methods because every method has a weakness. Therefore, if you use multiple methods, you're overcoming the weakness. So you may use a focus group, interviews, and a survey. And that way you're kind of crossing over all those weaknesses. Realize the interdependence of models and data. The data you get out of any research study is completely, totally dependent on how you designed it. And that's a huge weakness in any kind of research. Understand that research does cost. Information does cost, if nothing else, in human capital time. Always be skeptical of research. You want to know who did it, how they designed it, what their qualifications are, and so on. So you want to know the weaknesses in the study so you know how confident you can be with the information they give you. And always make sure that your research is ethical, that you're going by ethical standards, that you're not in any way hurting or deceiving your subjects. Okay, and that's it for research. And I don't mean to go over this lightly because it is a very important part of marketing today. Those of you who are marketing majors or minors, you're likely to be taking a marketing research class, and don't forget that there is a whole career field in doing marketing research. So, that's it for today, and we will carry on. Take care. Bye.